one of the things that you mentioned is very interesting. So in the Republic, so the Republic is about this morally or virtuously developed constitution, right? And one of the criticisms that Socrates receives while he's delivering this to his interlocutors is that, okay, you have described this philosophical constitution, this philosophical republic, and but this doesn't exist anywhere. Can you give me an example of this? And so Socrates, that is where Plato talks about the forms. Plato has this theory of forms. And one of the forms is like there is a prototypical tree that has all the qualities, the treeness of that tree comes from that prototypical tree. It doesn't exist anywhere in nature, the perfect tree. But from that, you see trees everywhere. And when you look at a tree, you say, yeah, it looks like a tree because it has the treeness, and the treeness in your mind is of that perfect tree. The philosophical republic is kind of like that. The fact that you can tell what a republic should be based on that perfect republic doesn't make that perfect republic a figment of your imagination. It exists. Just like the perfect tree exists. That's why you can find trees in nature because of that perfect tree. That's the example that he gives of that. So you can look at this argument both ways, that yes, the perfect tree exists, but really, does it exist? The perfect republic exists, but does it really exist? And the another way to look at it is also that, couldn't a perfect tree exist? Yes, it could exist. Similarly, there's no reason why a perfect republic cannot exist. Now, Socrates says perfect republic, where you get billions of people to be philosophical, is impossible to do. But he is using that as an analogy to say that one can build a perfect republic inside oneself. A rational individual can do that. And so that is the attempt there. But Aristotle differs from that. He believes that a perfect republic can be created by a philosopher king who would then impose his will onto his subjects. And the Republic kind of talks about how a philosopher king would be able to do that through intermediaries and so on and so forth, and all of that. So, all that to say that there is a possibility to create a perfect constitution. And I believe the founding fathers here and then whoever started constitutions elsewhere tried to do that. I think there's an attempt. And what we see as failures are not, in fact, failures, they are challenges, but it can be adapted, it can be modified, and it can be interpreted. And the interpretation should be more refined as time goes on. As a society, as a culture, we should be morally, virtuously more advanced today than we were back in the day. And in order for that to happen, one has to understand the concepts that our forefathers understood. Like they read the same books, like the Great Conversation, these great books was what they read. This was their foundational education. And based on that, they made decisions. And we are living in a world right now where we do not learn these things. And because of that, we are interpreting what they wrote in bizarre ways that is taking us away from society, from an eye toward the common good to profit. It's changing. There's inequality, there's injustice in the interpretation of the Constitution. Just to underscore your point, so the subset and superset here has flipped because of us, because we are not participating in the great conversation in order to improve on what our forefathers left us.
I think that it's actually a larger societal challenge that you're raising, which is that these books are meant to be studied and learned and interpreted and debated, and then our the educational system is flawed in that we're moving further and further away from this. And as you start to read, I think the book one of the 52 books in the Great Conversation, there's an editorial around education, and specifically saying, right, and this is that editorial might be 70 years old. I think it was in the 1950s that was written. It was saying then we've moved away from this college educations, a liberal arts education should be, these books should be included in that. And so unless you're a philosophy major, you're not reading them. And even if you are a philosophy major, and I can't speak to it directly, but my guess is you're not going through all 52 books in 4 years, if that's even possible. I mean, some of these books like Shakespeare is still taught, right? I mean, but if you're into English lit, maybe you're reading Kant or Dante, right? But
Yeah, but reading alone is like drinking alone.
yeah.
I mean, I think there is a debate that needs to happen, and there is a certain amount of practical wisdom one needs to have to understand what those words mean. Like, yeah, I could read Kant to pass an exam.
Yeah.
It's very
Right.
different from understanding what does it mean to what does the categorical imperative actually mean, and so on and so forth. Now, again, I'm not talking about armchair philosophers here, right? I don't think our founding fathers were armchair philosophers. These guys were riding horses and in waging wars, and they were living, breathing the times, right? We are nowhere as morally worthy as they were. Like, they were men of action, and but they had the philosophical foundation. We neither are we men of action. We like to believe we are, and we don't have the philosophical foundation. You see, that's what resiliency rounds is about, right? It's about the foundations of your moral obligation. If you are going to go out there in the world and you're going to move things around and intervene, you better understand what the underpinnings of that are. Like, who are you? What is driving your decisions, right? Jeremy,